Hey friends, welcome back. This is video, what are we at, 4 now? Okay, so Thrum mitten tutorials. So we have cast on, we have done our little bit of ribbing here, we've done our cuff, we've got our thrums, we have done our thumb gusset, we've thrummed all the way through, and now we are ready to separate the fabric so that we can continue knitting like the body portion of our mitten, and we're going to do something that's called an afterthought thumb. You can do things like afterthought heels with your sock knitting. It's generally the same principle, and anyways, we'll just get down to it. So I just want to bring your attention to the pattern, regardless of which fleece artist pattern you have with you. Basically what it's going to tell you is to put 7, 9, 10, or 11 stitches on a stitch holder, and then cast on 6, 8, 9, or 10, or whatever it is, stitches, and then continue knitting the body around. So what I want to tell you is just to forget those instructions right now. So when it comes to placing stitches on stitch holders, you're going to stop right there and you're going to say, yeah, no, Alana said don't do that. Rather than placing those stitches on stitch markers, you're just going to block them off. So you're going to count the stitches that would go on a stitch holder. Sorry, yeah, I meant to say stitch holder. So you've got your knit one, I placed mine back here, and then you've got the increases that you made for your thumb gusset. Instead of putting those on a stitch holder, we're going to do something else. First, we're going to put in something called a lifeline. Lifelines are excellent tools, and I encourage every knitter to figure this out because this is great when you are knitting a new project or tackling a new skill or technique. If you're doing lace repeats that you really don't want to, rip back and have to figure out again. Or if you just want to mark a finishing of a section. Anyways, what we're going to do is we're going to put these stitches here onto this lifeline, which is just a piece of cotton embroidery floss, and it's going to hold those live stitches just the way a stitch holder would. Okay, so let's start here. And now I've marked off 11 because that is how many I need to take, put aside for my thumb. So what I'm doing is I have a tapestry needle here. I've got that embroidery floss. This is the advantage of doing magic loop method. So I'm sorry to those of you who are doing this on double pointed needles. It might be a little more complicated. We're going to follow the cord and go through each of these stitches that is intended to go onto a stitch holder. And you can do these like a couple at a time, but the handy thing is putting the stitches onto a cord, because then they're much easier to grab with the tapestry needle here. And if you're looking to get tapestry needles, I'm a huge fan of metal. If you're not opposed to those, and I love the curve tip on them, especially for knitting projects or weaving in ends. Okay, so you can see that I've got a contrasting color here. When you're putting a lifeline into your work, there's a couple of things I want you to think about. First thing, you want it to be a much lighter weight or much thinner cord than the yarn that you're knitting with, because you don't want it taking up a lot of space or a lot of bulk in your project. It might throw off your gauge or make a couple rows look kind of funny. The second thing, use a contrasting color so that you can identify it so that you do not knit into it, because I want you to be very careful not to knit into this lifeline as we continue on with our project. 3 is I want you to choose fiber that is not the same as the fiber that you're using. What should I say to be more clear? Okay, so if you're knitting with wool, especially if it's not superwash wool, you don't want to put wool through as a lifeline. And the problem with that is that it might felt, and then you're going to have, the other colored fibers into the fibers of your project, or it might felt together completely, which may effectively ruin your project. So use a different type of yarn. Use like a fingering weight superwash with polyamide or something if you've got some sock yarn scraps around. You can use embroidery floss. You can use just sewing thread if you can handle working with very thin cord. That's totally fine. And what was the other thing I was going to say? I think that's it. Yeah, make sure it's a contrast color, a lighter gauge, a lighter weight, and a different fiber. Okay, so you can see it very well in there. And the other thing I want to warn you is and the reason we want it to be a contrasting color and smaller is because I don't want you to knit into this lifeline. I don't want you to knit into it. We're only knitting the stitches of our fabric. We are not knitting this, okay? So I've got this just off to the side here because I'm going to use it again. So I'm just going to put it back over here. And there's the other end. I'm leaving just a couple inches on the end there. Now I need to knit these stitches. What am I going to knit these stitches with? I am going to be putting on a scrap yarn. Scrap yarn. I like to carry around a like a little quarter cake of a Pima cotton that I used for a previous project because it's a nice light bright color. I usually knit with wool, so the cotton is always a different fiber. It's never the wool. It's nice and smooth, and it's pretty versatile and pretty affordable. So this is my scrap yarn that I'm going to be knitting onto. Let's just have a peek here. Okay, so rather than casting on more stitches to carry on with the body, we are just going to take a piece of scrap yarn and we're going to knit into these stitches that we've just put on a lifeline. Be careful, do not knit into your lifeline. Here we go. Wow, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep this in view of my camera while also keeping it in view of my view. Okay, here we go. All right, so let's count just to make sure that was correct because I should have 11, 4, 8, 10, 11. Yeah, that's good. So I can drop this stitch marker. I don't need it anymore. Okay. And I don't need this scrap yarn any longer, so I can snip a couple inches on the other side and just put that aside. My stitch marker over there. Okay, again, watch closely. These stitches on waste yarn, I'm going to pop them back over to my left needle. Just slip as if to purl. We don't want to change the twist or anything here. Again, sorry, I'm trying to adjust so that you can see my working hands. Here we go. Okay, there it is. And we'll just tighten everything up just for good measure because we don't want our fabric to look funky. And now we are going to pick up our working yarn. Working yarn is always the yarn that is attached to your cake, the yarn from which you're pulling. And now we're going to use the working yarn and we're going to knit into this contrasting scrap yarn. And again, we'll have 11 stitches. So remember stitch number 2 on a new needle. You always want to give that a little bit of a tug. Avoid ladders in your work. All right. just going one stitch beyond there. But I have knit 11 stitches onto that scrap yarn. So there's my scrap yarn. There's the end of my lifeline. Here is my working yarn. Here is my scrap yarn. Yep. And here is the other end of my lifeline. Okay, so I've identified everything there. Okay, let's count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then I've knit that one too. Okay. Before we move forward again, this is why we're glad to be on circular needles, because we love this cord. Let's pick up this again. This is our lifeline, and we're going to do just the exact same thing as we did before onto these stitches here. And we're going to run it along the course of the cord. I only want the 11 stitches though. I don't want number 12 there. So okay. So I've got 6 of them there. Made a bit of a tangle. No big deal. Okay. 7, 8, 9. 10 and 11. Okay, there we go. All right, so let's just have a little snip here so we don't have any more cord in the way than we need to. I'm just going to knit through the rest of this row, and then we're going to have a a much closer look at what we've just done here. And I hope before long you'll see why. Okay. Working yarn. Okay, there we go. So hereafter, I am going to continue to knit the body of my mitten here. This is like I said, literally an afterthought. It's an afterthought thumb. So I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to continue knitting, maintaining my thrum pattern up until I have reached my desired length so that my mitten fits right up to where my hands are. So I've got a little bit of a ways to go here. That's where my thumb is going to be. I'm trying to fit that in. So I've got a couple inches there. And you are just going to carry on knitting the body. So all of this stuff in your pattern, again, that says place on stitch holders, cast on 6/8, ignore all of that. We're doing this. So looking at it now, I'm just going to explain the why behind it. First of all, let's talk about this scrap yarn in the middle. This is basically put in place so that we can remove it later. And we're removing it so that we can pick up those stitches as live stitches and seamlessly create a thumb. So rather than picking up stitches onto a cast on edge, we're just continuing on knitting a fabric, and there will be live stitches. We'll have a nice even look to our fabric, and we're not going to have any obvious seams. The reason we've put the lifeline through on both sides is that that lifeline is going to guide us to put our needles right into those stitches so that we pick them up really easily and we pick them up in the right direction and not give anything a funky twist or interrupt our fabric. So maybe a little bit hard to see on this camera, but I've got that lifeline at the top, I've got the lifeline here, and then I've got this waste yarn, which is literally going to be snipped out and pulled out later. I will do a video on that. I'm going to have to work quickly to finish this mitten. So, but for the time being, if you've done this, you don't have to worry about it anymore. Just keep knitting your mitten until you're done at the top. And then cast that baby off. And then we'll continue on for the mitten. When we're ready to build the thumb, you're going to see how this technique gives us kind of a provisional spot where we can pick up live stitches. You can't even see where I picked up stitches here, where I ended and where I started the thumb on this side either, because the Afterthought thumb makes for a very nice, even, easy way to put on a thumb or a heel to a sock. It looks better and it's a lot easier, so just trust me on that one. That said, if you decide to go the old-fashioned way and follow the pattern, you are still, of course, welcome to do that. And if that's how you want to follow and create your mitten, I will support you through that, and I will help you with picking up stitches to build your thumb, but it won't be on this video. All right, so that's it for this one, and we'll have one more video before we're done.